Hello, Tribe, and welcome to another episode of the Faye Jones Life Podcast. This is your host, Faye Jones, and today we'll discuss the dangers of hyperpositivity and constant negativity. We'll also discuss how to have an honest outlook and how our relationship with God can help us find balance. I know that this is a hot topic because we've all experienced it where we've had, a day that's a little off and we vent or share about it, and somebody jumps all over our case about how negative we're being and how we need to be more positive and so forth. And yes, there is some truth to that. We need to find the positive in things, but it's also important to have realistic look how life is affecting us. And by realistic, I don't mean be so realist that you never have hope or faith um, and believe in that God can work in mysterious ways for do miracles. Um, there's there's an equilibrium, or we say a rhythm, uh, that we need to find in this, because being focused on being super positive all of the time and not accepting or embracing the fact sometimes life doesn't go as we planned has its consequences. On the other hand, you'll meet people, or you've experienced it yourself. We're not perfect. We all have seasons that we rather not share, but where we've been constantly negative, where it's difficult to see the good, the positive, the possibilities in life. And that's a dangerous place to be also, because it actually, not only the Bible has really great examples of what constantly being negative does, is this, when we don't have joy, uh, it literally rots rots our bones and rots us from the inside out. But science does have actually some really strong evidence based on research that they've done on people, especially in the psychological sector, that shows the effects of a person being constantly negative. And so that's what we're going to dive into today. And to grasp the idea of this, I want to define what hyperpositivity is and what constant negativity is. So hyperpositivity is a mindset that's characterized by an excessive focus on positive thinking, optimism, and a belief in a positive outcome that can be achieved through positive thinking alone. Here's the problem. It is often dismissing or minimizing negative emotions or experience. But I think it's safe to say for all of us that not every experience is positive, that not every emotion is joy or happiness or peace. We have negative emotions, and those emotions and experiences have a purpose, a time, and a place. Being hyper positive is something that affects us a lot because we see that on social media. We see it on social media all the time. And anybody who doesn't subscribe to that hyper positivity is named as a negative Nancy. But let's talk about also the constant negativity, because we know people that all they do anytime they get on social media, anytime you talk to them on the phone or face to face, everything is always negative. There's always a complaint. There's never any positive outlook on life, people, and situations. So constant negativity is a mindset characterized by persistent pessimism, cynicism, and a focus on all negative aspects of life, often leading to feeling of hopelessness, helplessness, and chronic unhappiness. We've all seen these people. They are the kind of people that look like they have a black cloud following them. You can never make them happy. Nothing ever makes them smile. Everything is always a catastrophe. The world's always going to end. Everything is always the worst case scenario. And here's the problem. Whether you embrace hyperpositivity or constant negativity, both can contribute to mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and stress related disorders. The reason being is because hyperpositivity can cause you to suppress negative emotions, leading to an emotional distress. And what do we mean by suppressing negative emotions and leading to an emotional distress? Well, essentially, it's going to make it look like anytime something negative happens, that your life is a failure, that you are inadequate, that life is unfair to you, that you're doing something wrong. And this is really dangerous, especially when you get around religious circles, regardless of whether it's Christianity or any other religious circle, because it can lead to people to believe that anytime they have a negative experience or something, a setback, that this means that they have offended God in one way or another, and that it's because of that that they're going through this experience, and that they're unworthy, and that they're a sinner, or that they're cursed. And while those instances can be, 90% of the time, that is not the case. It's just you're experiencing life. You know, getting a flat tire is not a sign that, oh my gosh, you're a horrible sinner, or you're under a demonic oppression. And being upset that you got a flat tire does not mean that you're a horrible person and you're super negative. It's a normal emotion. You get a flat tire, you're going to be a little upset because, number one, it is an inconvenience depending on how the tire blew and the circumstances surrounding that. It could have been a scary situation. So it's gonna, scare you or make you upset. It may make you late for an appointment or a job interview or something. And it's okay to have those moments. Now, the key is not negating that, but not getting stuck in it either. And when we come to being constantly negative, the impact on your mental health is this leads to a self perpetuating cycle of negative thinking and emotional pain. Um, and how we see that is not only do these people also suffer from anxiety, depression, and stress related disorders, but these are the people who are just constantly in the pits. Um, there's no hope. Life is always bad. They never have anything too good to say about themselves or anybody else for that matter. Um, very depressed. And this can also lead people to suicidal tendencies as well as homicidal tendencies. And you see it more happening on the people who constantly have a negative outlook in life, but it also happens with the people who have hyper positivity. You know, another danger of both of toxic positivity or hyper positivity is it tends to dismiss and invalidate experiences or the struggles that ourselves or another person is going through. And this is so important because when we invalidate the experiences or the struggles that we ourselves are going through or other people are going through, it's essentially acting like we're in denial. So how quickly we address the issue if we're unwilling to address the elephant in the room? So being hyperpositivity is something like, you have, let's say for instance, an eating disorder, and you have hope and you have faith that you overcome that eating disorder. But when you're sitting there actively manifesting the effects of the eating disorder, for instance, let's say that you're anorexic, so you go and now you're eating and then you're purging after you're eating, um, and somebody catches you purging. Hyperpositivity or toxic positivity will be like, it's okay, you're gonna overcome this, you got this. Where a good, healthy, level headed way of thinking says, I know you're struggling with this, and I know that you have what it takes to overcome it, but this action right now that you're doing of purging is not good for you and it's unacceptable. And we need to get you some help. That's not being negative. That is um, giving a person hope, but also holding the person accountable, understanding that action needs to be taken. I'll put myself also as an example when I had the accident back in September of 2020. I had a bunch of broken bones. I was in a lot of pain. Uh, there was days where it was difficult. Hyper positivity would have been in complete denial of the situation and been like, oh, good, this doesn't hurt, nothing's happening. I'm just going to keep on trucking like if nothing ever happened. Like, chronic negativity would have been like, why me? Why did this happen to me? It always happens to me. I can never get ahead. If it's not one thing, it's the other. That would have been a chronic negative state of mind. Now, a balanced perspective is what some of you who are tuning in and actually lived through this journey with me, you saw me be like, yeah, today I'm in a lot of pain, but I'm going to celebrate the fact that I could touch my middle finger with my thumb because I broke both of my wrists. For those of you that don't know the story, I broke motorcycle accident, broke both of my wrists and my right shoulder and my right ankle in that motorcycle accident. My right wrist, as well as my shoulder and part of the humerus, uh, required metal nuts and bolts and screws and plates to put everything back together and fix it. And one of the things was in a cast for a very long time, unable to move my hands and my arm for such a long time. One of the things is as the surgery was healing and the doctors were authorizing me, I had to start moving and I had to relearn how to use my hands. And on my right arm, I had to relearn how to do the basic things, not just how to use my fingers and my hands and my wrist and learning how to open doors and feed myself and all that again, but I even had to learn the simple tasks like learning how to bend my arm, learning how to lift my arm again, and all of those things. So it was a process. And I had to be realistic with the fact, okay, well, today was a more challenging day. It was painful. Physical therapy was tough. But there's where I acknowledge the situation, the emotions, the negative situation and circumstances that are going on there. But then that's where I also show empathy to myself by saying, you know what, it's okay to feel a little emotional because this hurts, because it's kind of scary, because you're learning how to use your limbs again and you don't know how fast you'll recover or if you'll ever recover. But then I also showed myself support by saying, you know what? You're surrounded by people who love you and care about you. You are going to ask for help. You're going to be humble and receive the help from the physical therapist, from the doctors, and from anybody else who wants to help you. You're going to have to be understanding of yourself and kind and caring with yourself because some days are going to be challenging and there are things that you may not be able to do, but that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. And that also led to me having a positive outlook in life, not a hyper positive one where I was like in complete denial of my situation and the emotions and everything, but a positive outlook in life where I was able to see like, oh, okay, today I made progress. I'm a little bit better than I was yesterday. Today I was able to touch my index finger, not just my middle finger. Today I was able to touch my pinky. You know, oh, I was able to type 20 words in a minute, little things like that. And so I was always set up goals to that. And that's the importance of having a level-headed, positive outlook in life and not leaning into that toxic positivity. With the chronic negativity, and here's the dangers of that. There is a persistent negative outlook that can impact personal relationships, work performance, and overall well-being, potentially leading to social isolation, mental health issues. Both toxic positivity and chronic positivity may result in inabilities to cope with life challenges, a lack of resilience, and stunted emotional growth. And this that I'm telling you, it is scientific research is proven. Uh, I'm going to be linking this on my blog. So if you visit my blog, fayejoneslive.com, in there, when you see this particular podcast episode, you will see the references along with the DOI for this particular article so that you can read it for yourself if you like. This is taken um, from the journal, the psychological journal from this psychological science called The Dark Side of Positivity, which was published in 2020. Um, and this article, they did certain studies, and the studies essentially discovered and highlight the potential dangers of excessive positivity, which include the suppressing of negative emotions, unrealistic expectations, and the belief that positive thinking alone can lead to success. It discusses the importance of balancing both your positive and negative emotions for your psychological well-being. So when I'm sharing these things with you, when I'm telling you that toxic positivity as well as chronic negativity result in your ability to cope with life challenges, lack resilience, and instance your emotional growth, there's actually solid science to do this. This is part of what, continuing on last week's episode, where we guard our mind, or what the Bible says, guard your heart, because out of it flows all the issues of life. Uh, we have to learn how to think. We have to learn how to process our emotions. We have to learn how to process what we're thinking and make assessments on whether what we're thinking is uh, is a healthy thought pattern. This is where what the scriptures talk about when it comes to renewal of the mind. This is exactly what it's talking about. Mm, Why is it so important to avoid extremes? Well, Ecclesiastes 7:18 talks about whosoever fears God will avoid all extremes. So when we have a fear of the Lord, and fear does not mean we're afraid of God, but rather that we have a healthy level of respect for God. We learn very quickly through evidence that He has shown us in the scriptures that we need to have a healthy level of balance of our thoughts and emotion and our perspective in life. The Apostle Paul also talks about that when he says, do not think higher of yourself than you ought to. When he talks about, I'm content, I've had a little, and I've had a lot, and I learned to be content in all things. Um, it is also so when you hear Jesus, where he's telling Peter and the rest of the disciples that he that that he's going to be crucified and he is going to die. And Peter is like, no, don't say that. That's never going to happen. Peter at that point was engaging in hyper positivity. And what did Jesus say? Jesus recognized that the enemy, Satan, was tempting Peter with hyper positivity. And what did Jesus respond? Get thee behind me, Satan. Because Jesus understood that even though he was a very positive man and he always had a positive outlook because he came to bring hope, he came to bring encouragement, he came to bring freedom, he came to bring healing, which are all beautiful, positive things. He understood that at times we're going to have to go through tests, trials and tribulations as part of the journey. And so Jesus there was saying like, hey, this is all part of the process. And if I don't go through this process, which to you may seem very negative um, in nature, you won't have everlasting life, which is the promise that I came to fulfill so that when you believe in me, you would not perish, which is extremely great news and very positive. I hope this is helping you understand why this is hyperpositivity or constant negativity are dangerous. Um, what are some of the benefits of embracing level headedness, a proper assessment of the situation, uh, where we're realistic, but we're not leaning to the sign of realist and we don't have hope or belief in a better outcome or future? Because realists tend to be very negative, but humbug in nature. But by developing a level headed outlook, uh, this means it involves acknowledging both positive and negative aspects of life rather than focusing solely on the extreme. So it's like roses are beautiful, but they also have their thorns. There's sunshine and there's rain. There's joy and there's moments of sorrow. The Bible is very clear on that when it says weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning, meaning that there may be a season where you're going to experience some sorrow, some pain, some discomfort, but joy is going to come in the morning. In other words, have hope. Things are going to get better. Jesus said it, have hope. I have overcome the world. Uh, he was telling us, don't fear. I've overcome this world. So because I've overcome, because I am here, you too can overcome. And that is, um, the beautiful thing. And that's why I'm trying to show you through this. And I hope that I'm making a compelling enough evidence of how psychology, which is learning how our mind works and how our thinking affects our mind, also now is showing you how that affects your spiritual life too, and how Jesus and the Heavenly Father have been teaching us psychology all along through the scriptures. So this is not a new concept. It is not a new topic. It might have been coined psychology in recent history, but this is something that has been going on since the beginning of time. Now, having that level-headedness uh, in our outlook of life and not going through all of the extremes help us make better decisions. It improves our problem-solving abilities and increases our resilience in the face of adversity. A lot of people come to me and say, Faye, like how you went through that season with the accident is just amazing. It was so inspirational. We never heard you complain. We never heard you get negative about it. And I can honestly tell you the only reason that I was able to have such a level headed outlook in life and had the resilience to face that adversity is because I embraced every aspect of what the scriptures say. Don't think higher of yourself than we ought to. Philippians 4:8, where, it talks about, think about everything good, everything noble, everything praiseworthy, everything of good name. Meditate on these things. And there's a promise behind that because it says that when we do that, the God that has the peace that surpasses all understanding is going to dwell with us. And because he is dwelling with us, we are not only going to have the peace that surpasses all understanding, but with that peace that surpasses all understanding, there is hope, there is joy, there is contentment, there is a strength. The word says, when we are weak, he is strong. So when we're able to focus on everything good, on every promise of God, on knowing that We may be persecuted, but we're not abandoned. We may be struck down, but we're not destroyed. When we understand that that the righteous can fall many times, but God is right there to pick us back up, and that is in Psalms 37, guess what happens? You understand that no matter what circumstances you're going through, no matter what the struggle is, there's hope and there's a good future on the other side of that circumstances of that trial. So that is why I didn't get traumatized. That is why I didn't lose my mind. That is why I didn't get negative. That is why I didn't get depressed. That is why I was very optimistic and able to bounce back and be here today, actually having the authority to be able to share about mindset with you. Because you see, this is not a theory. This is not something that I am learning through psychology school. This is not a thing that I'm learning from a book or because I simply read a research paper. This is something that I live every single day in my life. I live this every single day in my life. And because this is my norm, this is my reality, this is my lifestyle, this is my second nature, my DNA, my breath of life, it is consistent with my character, consistent with my lifestyle. You're gonna see me walk this out every day. And that is the power of this. Because I never knew that that journey that I went through would lead to this. And I never knew that that journey that I went through back in 2020 would impact as many people as it did. And so I want you to grasp this. Here's another aspect, and I'm trying not to get in the rabbit hole and overload you with too much information because I know there is such a thing as information overload. But understand this. When we're constantly in a negative state of mind, constant negativity, or we're in that hyper positivity phase where we're in denial, there's a part of us because when we're in hyper positivity, we are more vulnerable and susceptible to imposter syndrome. And that imposter syndrome, because because see, at that point when we're hyper positive, we come into a place where we're now faking it. We're faking it till we make it. We're living with a mask, with a facade. And all of that, just as equally as bad as the chronic negativity, it, like we said, it leads to the anxiety, the depression, and other mental health issues. And here's the thing. When you're in a constant state of stress, anxiety, depression, your fight and flight mechanism of your body, which is a defense mechanism, is on high alert and on almost all of the time. And why is this important? The frontal lobe or frontal cortex is the part of the brain that is used to process critical thinking, information, decision making, controlling impulses. So this is where we learn how to be level headed, where we learn to have self control, where we learn to analyze situations and develop a level headed view where we realize it's not catastrophic. Our life is not going to end because my tire blew out. We just need to get the tire fixed and life continues. It's a very important part of the brain. When we're in constant fight or flight, our body, without our consent, shuts down the access to that part of the brain. And now we are purely living based on reactions only. We're not critically thinking so that we can respond to a situation. We are reacting, which means sometimes the actions and the decisions we make while we're under this state are based under false pretexts and false information because it is based on what our brain concocted and says is reality. when in reality, what our brain says is reality may not be the truth of what's really going on in that situation. And this is what leads people to overreact and to make some really drastic decisions. And depending on how long the hyperpositivity or or the constant negativity has been going on, and how severe the anxiety, the depression, and other mental the stresses are. This is why we see people that, oh my gosh, they seem so happy, they were so positive. I don't understand why they committed suicide. This is why. This is exactly how it happens. This is how we get, you know, unfortunately, the Robin Williams of this world, who spend an entire lifetime making people laugh, making people happy, but they were dying on the inside because they built a lifestyle and a persona around happiness and joy and positivity to such an extent that they created a prison for themselves where they didn't feel like they had the freedom to be who they are and to have vulnerable moments where, you know what, I don't have it all together. Right now, life is difficult. Hey, I got trauma. I got issues. This is exactly how that happens. So this is why the dangers of hyperpositivity or constant negativity, because if you're people who have no hope, people who think life is bad and it's a horrible experience and the whole world sucks and humanity sucks and everything's horrible. It's like the life, they're dead. They already cease to exist while they're living. They don't get to see the beauty in life. That's no way to live. So it's important that we learn to have realistic outlooks of every situation. This allows us uh, to have healthier emotional regulation and overall great well-being. And here's another aspect of it. It also helps you build better relationships because one of the problems that people who are hyper positive or constantly negative is that they're so far to the extreme that when somebody doesn't view the circumstances from the same point of view that they see them, they tend to want to shut the person out. They tend to want to manipulate the person into seeing things the way they see them. And if the person just says like, hey, we're going to have to agree to disagree, they tend to now start labeling those people as difficult or toxic or anything like that. When in reality is that the person who's on the extremes is the one that's toxic. The other person is choosing to like recognize like, you know what, life happens. And sometimes it's going to be great. Sometimes it's not going to be great. I'm going to do my best to stay positive. But some days I'm going to vent. Some days I'm going to be okay. Some days I'm going to need a minute. And that is perfectly okay. It is perfectly okay to have those days. We just need to make sure that that we're not consistently creating a pattern of always having those days. And for lack of a better words, we say balancing optimism and pessimism uh, to better navigate life's challenges. Um, I'm using the word balancing because I don't know that we have a better word to use in our dictionary, but I would like to say that more than striking a balance, it's more like understanding the rhythm because we have seasons in life where things are going to be really, really good and we don't really face very many challenges. So it's very easy to be optimistic. But then there may be seasons where you go through things like, oh man, you have car troubles, all of a sudden you got sickness, you got family members dying, job loss, and it seems like everything happens all at once. And so in those moments, while you're doing your best to remain with a positive outlook, some days may be a little more challenging than others. And so I always want to say, find that rhythm where no matter what life throws at you, you have a resource to help you learn how to process the situations, the emotions, the experiences in a healthy way so that you can, yes, acknowledge the situation for what it is, but not allow it to give you a negative perspective and a negative outlook about your life and your future because you can understand that these circumstances are temporary and that there is a solution, that there is hope, that there is a way out. And so that is it's it's extremely important to balance that. Now, one way and that I've learned and we're gonna read the scripture and again it's Philippians chapter 4, it's literally psychology 101. It is a gem. I think everybody should study chapter 4 Philippians and get it. Because if you understand the journey of the Apostle Paul, this was a man who used to be essentially a terrorist and he came to know the Lord. And now the same people that he used to terrorize, he is now preaching to them about the God he used to persecute and say, hey, I used to persecute Christians. I hated Jesus. But then I had an encounter with Jesus, and Jesus was merciful and kind with me. And I'm sorry for the people that I harmed, the lives that I took, but I want to let you know that Jesus is real and that He's merciful, He's loving, He's kind, and His grace is not a license to sin, but rather the empowerment to overcome any obstacle, any sin that presents itself in our lives. And this is a man who went from being very influential within his community. He was a scholar who had studied with one of the best scholars of the time, very eloquent. It is safe to say that he was into politics and law. So some people say that he could have easily been a lawyer during those times. He went from having all these comforts to all of a sudden those people whom he used to be friends with hate him because he realized who Jesus was and the good news of Jesus, and they started to persecute him to the point where they wanted to kill him. He it was imprisoned, he was beaten, a lot of times beaten so bad that people thought he was gonna die. Um, Hunger, he experienced uh, as a prisoner be capsized in the middle of the sea and having to fend for survival, going for weeks without any food, all kinds of circumstances. So when when we read what we read in Philippians chapter 4, you realize that the grace of God and what he learned through the teachings of Jesus Christ and through what the Bible teaches us about kingdom living and kingdom mindset, because Jesus was a preacher of the kingdom, not a religion. Paul, all the disciples, they weren't preaching Christianity, they were preaching kingdom. And that's a completely different message. Um, you find that this is so amazing because you're like, wow, this man was resilient through some of the most difficult circumstances. Let's read what Philippians 4:11 and 12 say. It says, I have learned to be content with whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secrets of being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. He's teaching us right here the importance of developing contentment. And contentment does not mean you settle. It means you learn to embrace the positive and negative aspects of life. And you learn to remind yourself that regardless of the stage that you are in life, while you remain hopeful and you work towards a new future, you can have peace and fulfillment in this very moment where you're at, even though you're not yet at your destination. And this is the reason why it's so important. Because for people who are goal oriented and they're always thinking about the goal, and I'm going to be happy when I reach this goal. I'm going to be happy when this circumstances change. I'm going to be fulfilled once I accomplish this. Once you get there, there's going to be something else that you're going to want to accomplish in order to be happy, to be at peace, or to feel fulfilled. But when you learn to find happiness, peace, and fulfillment in the now, you will learn how to sustain that throughout the whole journey. Every level has a new devil. And the only way you're going to beat those new devils is to learn how to find peace and fulfillment, joy in that moment. Because all of that will birth gratitude. And that's what keeps you grounded. That's what keeps you steadfast. That's what keeps us level headed, or as the Bible will say, sober minded. Where we're not controlled by our emotions and feelings. We're not controlled by the circumstances, but rather we're controlled by the truth. And for me, truth is not relative. We have the scriptures to tell us what the truth is. Now, what is the role of our faith in finding that balance or that level headedness or that sober mindedness? One of the beautiful things about our faith that some has labeled as Christianity, but really, I want to present to you the argument that one of the reasons I don't like using the name Christian is because Jesus was not about a religion. The message of Jesus Christ, the message that the Bible brings, is not about our religion. It's rather about a kingdom and the citizens of that kingdom. So when the word says, you know, you're in this world, but you're not of this world. See, I'm here, but I'm not a citizen of this world. I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. And I've been put on this earth on an assignment. And as an ambassador of the kingdom, there's a benefit package. And so that's what I'm going to present to you right now. How the benefit package of the kingdom helps us find sober-mindedness, fulfillment, and that level-headedness regardless of the circumstances. And I've already been sharing that with you, but I'll go a little bit deeper. You see, when we talk about God as a kingdom citizen, we're not just talking about a deity who's all powerful and all knowing, but we're saying he is the king of the kingdom because he is the monarch. And as the monarch, he says, no weapon formed against you who are a citizen of my kingdom shall prosper. I will turn every plan that the enemy has forged against you to work together for your good. That is a kingdom benefit, a kingdom guarantee when we're fully devoted to that kingdom. So having faith in God's plan, which is, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you, give you hope, and give you a future. And in the full context of that, that means that even when all hell is breaking loose, even when He allows negative situations, circumstances, events to take place in our life, His plan is always for our good, is always for our benefit, is always to give us hope and to give us a new future. So when we have that trust, because that's what the word faith means, believe it or not, emunah, trust. I mean, faith means trust. That's what the word faith means. The word faith in Hebrew is emunah, and emunah means trust. When we have trust in God's plan, this allows us to acknowledge that there's a greater purpose behind the events in our life, both positive and negative. And this understanding provides comfort and reassurance in the face of adversity. And this is what I just got done telling you that helped me get through that accident. And embracing that trust in God also gives us stability, security, knowing we're never alone and that God's love and guidance is always available to us. That trust in God enables us to rely on Him and His strength rather than solely rely on our strength and all our understanding. And the word tells us that. It tells us, lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall make your path straight. Because our understanding can be flawed. Our emotions manipulate that. And this part of our emotions and how they manipulate is actually a deeper topic that we are going to be discussing. I am going to be releasing a course in the near future where we're going to be talking about this because I want to teach you guys about good, healthy, strong mindset and a renewal of the mind. Because this is important because when we're wearing the armor of God says that the helmet of salvation protects us, protects our mind from the fiery darts of the enemy. Um, Jesus Christ died on the cross to bring salvation. So that means that the salvation that we're talking about is a transformation of the mind. Because if the helmet is the helmet of salvation, which is what Jesus Christ came to give, is that Jesus Christ came to protect our minds and change our minds into a different mindset and values that promoted well-being. I'm going to let that sink in for a little bit. And if you need to replay it, you're going to replay it. Like I said, we're going to get into that in a course. I am calling that course Mind Connect. Like I said, I'm in the process of building it. So, I've got a few more modules to finish and we'll be able to launch that. And you'll be able to get in there and really grab a hold of these truths. Um, but when we embrace that faith, we put on that helmet of salvation. Now we're not leaning on our own strength. We're dealing on His strength, His understanding, and this helps us avoid the pitfalls of being to and fro like the waves of the sea, where one day we're thinking one way we're thinking another, and it all depends on our emotions. So this keeps us balanced, it keeps us level-headed and sober-minded, avoiding us to go into those extremes of constant negativity or hyperpositivity. Um, this allows us to take a truthful, honest account of the realities of life and the promises of God. It keeps us sober-minded. Um, and it is through that salvation, of that renewal of the mind, that restoration of the mind, that learning how to hold those thoughts captive, which is everything, the Word teaches us about. We learn how to make sense of our experiences, and we learn from those experiences, and this teaches us how God's grace can allow us to navigate life's challenges with grace and resilience. And it's very interesting because in 2012 there was the journal ISRN Psychiatry published a research by Towing titled Religion, Spirituality, and Health, the Research and Clinical Implications. And like I said, I'm going to share all of these in my blog post. But it's really interesting because in his findings, he highlights that the numerous ways in which faith and spirituality can contribute to improved mental health, emotional health, and physical well-being. And he emphasizes the importance of a strong spiritual foundation for maintaining overall health and finding balance in life. These are scientists that are telling us you must take care of your spiritual health because your spirituality will affect how you think. And people who embrace a walk with God, who take care of their spirit being, tend to be more level headed, more balanced, sober minded. Therefore, they don't go into extremes and they can be more resilient and healthier in their mindset, in their emotional and psychological well being. And all of that leads to better relationships. It leads to better relationships. So now what are some practical steps to foster that level headedness or that sober mindedness? There's two things. You must practice self awareness and you have to practice gratitude. And self awareness involves recognizing and understanding your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. See, when you understand why you're thinking the way you're thinking, why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and what's driving your behavior, you can identify the patterns that are leading you to lean towards either hyperpositivity or constant negativity. And you can take the appropriate steps to course correction. Practicing gratitude is also important because it helps you shift your focus from what you're lacking to what we have. So it gives us a more realistic perspective on our lives because think about it. Especially, this is a phenomenon in Western society more than anything. We're so focused on what we don't have that we forget the blessings we have. So let's say a person wants a Gucci bag and they don't have that Gucci bag, they feel incomplete. They feel like life sucks. But they have like 30 other Gucci bags in their closet. They got a closet full of clothing, full of shoes. They live in a beautiful house. They have a nice, reliable transportation, a refrigerator full of food, a pantry full of food, a comfortable bed to sleep in, air conditioning, heating, running water inside the house. Yet life sucks because you don't have one thing. See how crazy that is? Because if you realize all the other blessings you already have, it gives you a realistic perspective that no, life does not suck and you're actually quite blessed and you actually have been afforded quite a few things that are not common or normal for other people to have. And you get to enjoy them every single day the minute you open your eyes and take a breath of air. So now when we start to express gratitude for our blessings, both big and small, we start to look life from that perspective of, you know what? Yeah, I want that thing. It sucks that I don't have it, but it's not the end of the world. My life is not incomplete because of that. The world doesn't suck and my life's not going to end. Thank you for that. But it improves your emotional well being. It will improve how you see yourself. It will improve how you approach God. It will improve how you deal with others. Another thing to foster that level headed mindset is realistic expectations. You know, um, we want to set goals that are challenging yet attainable. Because we want to foster that sense of accomplishment and self efficacy. That self efficacy um, will minimize those feelings of disappointment and failure. Um, and what does realistic but challenging goals look like? Well, let's take fitness for instance, and I'll put my son as an example. He just started a new fitness routine, and he's learning. You know, he's using a rower, and day one, he had a goal to 200 rows in a 20 to 30-minute period. So he accomplished his goal in 21 minutes on the first try. The second day when he went to do it, he accomplished the 200 rows in 15 minutes. So the goal was 200 rows, and he's accomplished that goal, and he actually got faster at it and more efficient at it. So that gave him a boost of confidence. So now he's like, huh, I'm going to have to up the amount of rows because I still want to get 20 minutes in. Let's see how many more rows can I do in a 20-minute period. They're challenging because now he's got to up his rows, but they're attainable because he's saying, okay, I'm going to go from 200 rows to 250. He's not saying I'm going to go from 200 rows to 5,000 rows. You know, physically you got to build the stamina and the endurance to be able to do 5,000 rows. You know, you don't go from 0 to hero overnight in those things. And so a lot of the times, part of the reason that we either embrace that hyper positivity or that constant negativity is because our goals are very unrealistic. And we think they're challenging, but they're not challenging. They're very unrealistic. There's a difference between setting appropriate, challenging yet attainable goals and reaching for goals that are virtually impossible. You know, before you learn to run, you gotta learn to walk. Before you learn to walk, you gotta learn to crawl. It's a process of life. And we'll say, oh, well, we believe with God for the impossible. Absolutely. We believe with God for the impossible. And we see that with the people of Israel, that as they were led out of Egypt and they were in the wilderness, there was the promise for the promised land, and God showed them exactly how much land they were to get. However, there's a passage which a lot of people fail to read. And scripture says, this is the land that I promised your ancestors. This is the land that you will promise. But I am not going to give it to you all at once. I am going to let you to grow into it so that the beasts of the land will not overtake you. You see, God gives us our promises, but he has to sometimes, the promise is there, but he has to give us a process to grow into it so we're not overtaken by the blessing. And now that thing that was supposed to be a blessing becomes our curse. So we must learn to go through the process. We must learn to assess those goals. Now, there's also an aspect of embracing vulnerability. And that means embracing the vulnerability, not just with everyone, but embracing vulnerability with people who are safe to embrace those vulnerabilities with. And we need to be able to seek support from our community of faith. And again, let's say, use wisdom, use discernment. Not everybody deserves to be a part of your struggle, to be a part of those seasons of life where you're going through a challenge. It's actually a privilege. They have to prove and have that track record that they could be trusted with and that they're not going to weaponize it against you or use it as gossip or um, fuel for judgment or anything like that. Um, but having people you could be vulnerable with and that are going to provide you with good, healthy support is important because being open and honest about our struggles, our fears, our emotions can help us break free from the constraints of hyperpositivity or constant negativity. Being able to share our experiences with others, whether it's in our community faith or in a support group or with a therapist, a coach, psychiatrist, um, it brings support, it brings encouragement, and it brings guidance. Yes, helps tremendously. Um, it helps tremendously to achieve that balanced mindset. So it's important to have the right people in your life. And it's important to have those people you can be vulnerable with. I know in the past I have been open about certain situations and experiences that I had gone through in my life and the challenges that I had faced. I wasn't sharing from a place of hurt or pain because I had already gone through the healing process. It was mainly sharing the journey because I wanted to depict the reality of what that situation and circumstances looks like in um how it affects a person. And some individuals, full man, they came on the attack because again, being on that toxic hyper positivity mindset, they thought I was being, dishonoring and that I was just being negative and being a crybaby and all of that. And I knew that was coming. I had to stand really firm at that point and be like, no, this has to be addressed, and you don't have the right to tell anybody that they cannot share their experience, their struggles, their fears, or their emotions, or the process that they have gone through, because this is the exact same reason that we have so many people in our society today, whether they're in church or not, committing suicide because they're going through stuff and people like you are creating an environment where they don't feel safe to be vulnerable about their journey and the reality of what's going on in their lives. And that needs to change. And me standing so firm and enduring that led me to where we're at right now. And it has led countless people that were exposed to those stories in that season to open up about their own struggles, their own journey, and they're actually getting help now. They're actually receiving healing. They're recognizing that they're not bad people, that they're not awful for thinking eh, the way they think or having the experiences that they had. Um, they're able to mature. They're able to break free. Their their mental health is getting better. This is all a part of the process. This is all a part of the process. And so we have to be wise with this. So I hope you can understand that this is this is so important because this is how we renew our mind. See Romans 12:2 when it talks about do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. We have to become sober minded and grounded in order to even possess the ability to discern what is God's good, pleasing, and perfect will. And that requires that at times where it's going to be about developing that self awareness, we're going to have to learn gratitude, realistic expectations, and at times it means we're going to have to seek support and learn to embrace some vulnerability in the right environments. This is not, when you're going through something, being vulnerable and spewing everything to the first person that will hear you is not the appropriate thing. Choose the right people to vent to, because some people will actually lead you into worse circumstances than what you're already in. Um, just to recap through this episode, we've explored the dangers of living in both extremes of hyperpositivity and constant negativity. We've covered the benefits of embracing a level-headed look in life and the vital roles that faith plays in finding that equilibrium or that rhythm in our lives. We know that our faith in God provides us with a solid foundation to navigate life's challenges with grace, resilience, and that sober mindedness, and that trusting in His plan and seeking His guidance cultivate healthy and grounded perspectives for our lives. So now, here we are at the end of the podcast, and we got an action plan where I want you to take. And I want to encourage you to reflect on your own mindset and the ways in which you might be learning or leaning towards extreme positivity or hyperpositivity or constant negativity. Consider the practical steps that we've discussed today, and those are the cultivating awareness, self-awareness, practicing gratitude, setting realistic goals, embracing vulnerability, and seeking support. And strive to incorporate these in your daily life. Also, if you want to dig deeper and you're listening to this podcast on one of the platforms, whether it's Apple or uh, Spotify or Amazon, I want you to head on over to FayeJonesLive.com. And right there on that page, when you click on, if you scroll down, you'll see the blog episode, or you can click on blog and look for the category that says podcast, and you'll find today's episode. And in there, I'm going to be sharing 10 questions. I coined them called Dig Deeper section. And those 10 questions are 10 very thought provoking, introspective questions that are going to help you to expand on this topic that we have discussed in today's podcast. I promise if you do this, you're going to get a lot out of it. It's a free resource. Yes, this podcast is free. You're not paying anything for it. But think about this as your weekly one-on-one coaching with me. Because if you were to do one-on-one coaching with me in person, I'm going to give you dig deeper questions. But you're going to be paying a pretty penny for it. So do not minimize this simply because it's a free resource. I am giving you tools to live your best life. I'm giving you tools so that you can be whole, healthy, you can have strong family, strong relationships, healthy mindset so that your soul can prosper. And as your soul prospers, so shall you prosper. And that is powerful. That is powerful because now you become unstoppable. You become unkillable. The enemy will not be able to shake you. And you'll be able to conquer and accomplish everything God has set out for you. And so this is why I provided that resource for you. I'm not doing this for the money. I will tell you, I've been on this journey for a long time. I love what I do. Pay or no pay, I will do it. I charge for certain things because, website hosting is not free. Recording software, course hosting stuff, all the different resources, video editing, audio editing, all those things are not free. And so, of course, I have to charge. I have to make a living too. Food at the grocery store is not free. Roof over our head is not free. Transportation is not free. You get the picture. But I'm not doing this with my main goal of taking money out of your wallet. I'm doing this because this is my life's work. Because I genuinely want to see an army, a sea of people that are healthy emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. That they will be able to fulfill everything God's put them on this earth to do. So that is the reason I do this. So if you're one of those people that you're going to take this seriously and you really want to maximize every area of your life, you want to be able uh, to reach your full potential in Christ and to fulfill your assignment, I invite you to go to faithjoneslife.com and do the dig deeper questions for this episode. And I also invite you to stick around and look, check our blog regularly because we're going to be releasing some courses here in the future that are going to help you to dig deeper into building that resilience and supercharge your mental and emotional performance so you can live a life uh, beyond your wildest dreams. You'll be able to heal from things that have been plaguing you for a long time and you didn't even know they were plaguing you. We're going to break you free from a lot of things. But while we're doing that, I want to say thank you for sticking around and tuning into this episode. Share this episode with somebody else. Share this with somebody else who you feel could benefit from it. Don't keep the blessing to yourself. Let them know, hey, here's a powerful resource that's going to help you. Sit down and listen to this episode with your family, with your loved ones. Have discussions about it. I think this is very important. Hope that I've taught you how the Bible is not irrelevant, but actually it's more relevant now than ever, in that we can apply those biblical principles in very practical ways, and how science does not negate the Bible and the Bible does not negate science, because science is the study of God's creation. It actually helps us understand better what God has already said about his creation. So with that said, thank you for tuning in to the Faye Jones Life podcast. I love you. Until next Monday, have a blessed week.